Hello, it is about 2 minutes past 5. Apologies, that'll teach me for running up the stairs. Welcome to the Housing Decision Meeting, which is the last of this municipal year. My name is Councillor Darren Sanders, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing, and I won't be running up the stairs too much longer for this week. Before we begin, there is some safety information which I need to relay. Apologies if you're watching this on webcam after the parking special this afternoon. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Great. Please assemble by Queen Victoria statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the fire marshal regulations of the Portsmouth Cultural Trust, in whose building we are in, anyone who's signed in at the reception desk should remember to sign out when leaving the building after today's meeting. The meeting is being web streamed, so hello. I've got to draw everyone's attention in this room that this meeting is going to be filmed from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the room. And the recording will be on the council's website to download and watch. The camera will mainly capture the backs of anyone making deputations, but there will be some footage of them as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room. Sorry about this, whilst the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone remember to use the microphones provided when they are speaking. That's the formal stuff. Hopefully I'll get my breath back by 20 past 5. In the meantime, before we begin the formal agenda, I just want to make sure everybody knows each other. I will start on my right. Joe.
Joanne Wildsmith, Democratic Services, taking the minutes today.
I'm James Hill, the Director of Housing, Neighbourhoods and Building Services.
Mark Sage, Tackling Poverty Coordinator.
Paul Fielding, Assistant Director for Housing.
Claire Hardwick, Acting Head of Private Sector Housing.
Lauren Bellamy, Anti-Property Officer for Portsmouth City Council.
Jo Bennett, Head of Business Relationships, Growth and Support.
Wayne Layton, Finance Manager.
Graham Fairbrother, IT Business Partner.
Meredith Hughes, Assistant Director Buildings. Steve Groves, Head of Building Maintenance.
Liam Barsby, Unemployed and Homeless.
Mada Abrams, CLG and Residents Consortium meeting. The Residents Consortium member.
Maria Cole, CLG Residents Consortium.
Luke Stubbs, Conservative Group Spokesman on Housing.
Tom Coles, Labour Group Spokesperson on Housing.
And that's 2 people now out of breath at this meeting, so this is going to be fun. Right, and Liam, thank you very much for coming. Just to explain to people watching, we have certain procedures that we're going to follow. Okay. Okay, I didn't know that you knew. Joanne, is Liam down to speak on anything at all?
I wasn't aware.
Okay, that's fine. So you may just have to listen to us witter on for about an hour. Okay? Sorry about that now. Right, so I was going to say apologies for absence, but as Tom is as out of breath as I am, that's no then, and looking slightly redder than I am, which means he's fitter. Now, does anybody have anything interesting to declare? Luke? I get worried now. Right, okay.
I don't know if this is declarable or not, but in respect of item 3 about financial assistance in the private sector, which is simply that I have an investment property which I was sort of be looking to let, so I don't know if that's declarable, but I'll make that declaration anyway.
Well, thank you for declaring that, Luke, and I'm sure the lettings agents and estate agents will be equally interested in the discussions with you later, but thank you for declaring that. Okay, so we now go on to the financial assistance to enter private sector housing. Just for Luke, just for your benefit, Liam, what we do is we get the officers to talk about it, and then I ask colleagues from the Residents Consortium and the CLG to put forward any comments. Then I ask Luke and Tom to put forward any comments, and then I sum up. Okay? It is a report by the Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services. So, James, is it you or is it someone else?
I'd like to introduce Mark to talk to the report, if I may.
Yes, you can. Mark, fire away.
Thanks very much. So my name's Mark Sage. I'm the Council's Tackling Poverty Coordinator, introducing this report on financial assistance to access private sector rented housing in Portsmouth. The purpose of the report is to outline the financial assistance that's currently offered by the Council to access private sector housing for people that qualify, and to outline some options for extending financial support to people who don't currently qualify on what the Council offers now. The report notes that finance is just one of the barriers to accessing private sector housing. There are other barriers, and this is specifically focused on the issues around rent deposit, but the report notes that there are other barriers as well. The Council currently provides assistance to help people access the private rented sector under two key streams. So the Homelessness Prevention Fund, which comes from the Council's Flexible Homelessness Support Grant, and discretionary housing payments, which is payments that are managed by the Housing Benefit Team at the Council. So the Homelessness Prevention Fund is specifically for people who are threatened with homelessness. That's managed by the Housing Options Team in the Council. There's a table in the report which notes how many people have been assisted, and that the number of people assisted is significantly higher this year than last year. Between the two schemes, at the moment the Council's helping roughly around 7 households each week to be able to access a home with financial assistance from the Council. The discretionary housing payments are only available to people that are currently in receipt of housing benefit or in receipt of universal credit with a housing costs element, and they also they must have a need to move. So I've noted there what those be. It could be because people are overcrowded, could be that they're threatened with homelessness, or that their current home is unaffordable. And again, the details there, how many people have been assisted, and again, that the number of people requiring assistance and who've been assisted by the Council has significantly increased this year. So in terms of a rent deposit scheme, the Council doesn't currently have a standalone rent deposit scheme that anybody in the city can come and access. There's these two types of help that assist people in particular circumstances. And it notes that there isn't specific information on the Council's website just for people that are looking for help with rent deposits. It also notes that we do help some people using a bond where the Council doesn't have to pay money up front, but it makes a commitment to a landlord that it will cover certain costs. But at the moment, that's quite a limited offer, and we're not helping a significant number of people through that, generally because the demand from private sector landlords is that they want the finances up front. So then it talks to potential options for expanding rent deposit assistance to help more people than we're helping at the moment. One possibility is working with a local credit union to assist more people to borrow the money for a deposit, but of course that means needing to pay that back, and the credit union does charge interest. And then another option would be for the local authority to find additional funds to fund more help for people, and then also a decision would need to be made as to who would be assisted and in what circumstances the Council could provide help. So the recommendations the report makes is to note the provision that is already available from the City Council. Also recommends that we update our information to make it clear to all residents how those schemes can assist, so that information is readily available. Also to note the desire to expand the assistance that we provide to people in Portsmouth, and then for officers to look at the potential options and risks and look at a fully costed report putting forward the options for expanding assistance.
Okay. That's it. Thank you for that, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. Ma'am, do you have any comments at all? If you don't have, that's absolutely fine. Don't worry. You're not under pressure to say anything. Is that all right?
Yes, all right.
Thank you. Maria?
Yes, just one small point. If someone is housed and you've given them a loan to help them get housed, could that not be charged alongside the rent so that you get the loan back because there's a low repayment of loans?
So in this case, where we're working with private sector landlords, they will be charging the rent themselves. So if the loan's coming from the local authority, I'm not quite sure whether landlords would want to collect that on our behalf. But we do have some schemes where we provide loans at the moment, and our finance team takes on the responsibility for managing repayments of the loan. So that is one potential option. The issue with increasing loans significantly is that rent affordability is a big problem. So actually being able to meet your weekly rent is enough of a challenge. A loan obviously adds an additional cost on top of that, but it's definitely one of the options to be explored. Thanks.
Well, can I just, if I may, I just want to follow up. Wayne, as our finance person, is there anything legally problematic in terms of charging things, or charging any money we might use alongside private sector rents? Is there anything legally that we can't do in terms of that? That's a question which I hope the answer is no.
No.
Thank God for that. Okay, those were the right answers. That's excellent. Claire, again, following up Maria's point, from your experience of the private rented sector, is what Maria is suggesting, which is to have basically a sort of a two-track approach, which is the loan is repaid and we somehow get involved with the private sector about it, is that possible? Is that something landlords are interested in, something tenants are interested in? And if you don't know, say so.
It's something that we could explore. I think the point that Mark made about the affordability and the issues around collecting that, probably the two main barriers to that really. But it may be something that landlords would be interested in and that would be beneficial to the tenants as well. It's something that we can explore.
Okay. That's very kind. Thank you, Claire. Maria, sorry to interrupt you, Mum. Did you have anything else? Excellent. Luke?
I think it's a real problem that you're trying to address. I absolutely agree. I note you've got two options, whether to do this in-house or via a credit union in some form, and I think one of the things which will end up driving your decision is really what's going to happen in the future in terms of level of demand, because you pick out here that the number of people, the number of households dealt with per week has effectively doubled in a year. And the question I would want to know in your position is that a blip? Is this a trend and we expect another rapid rise, or is it somewhere in the middle? Why has the number doubled in a year? I think that's an important question.
And does anybody have any answers to it? I mean, he doesn't have to go, you don't have to go through me for that, but I mean, does anybody have any answers for that, Mark?
Yeah,
if not, say so.
Yeah, thank you. One reason, certainly on the Housing Options Homelessness Prevention side, is the introduction of the Homelessness Reduction Act. So that has meant that they're helping a wider group of people than they were prior to April last year. And it may be because of that they're working more with housing benefit and directing people more that way. But we're not sure that that's the only reason for the increase with discretionary housing payments through housing benefit.
Okay. That's fine. Luke, anything else, sir?
No, not really. I mean, I think if any change driven by the Homelessness Reduction Act is likely to be ongoing, so therefore this is, you do on the face of it have a bit of a budgetary hole to figure out what to do, and on the back of that, I think looking to involve a credit union might well be a sensible thing to do.
Thank you for that, Luke. Tom?
Thank you. Has the council considered setting up a social letting agency to improve access to private renting for low-income and vulnerable families?
This looks like University Challenge here. It's just like no conferring. Do you want me to answer that? No, you do it, Paul. You're better at it than I am.
We are considering lots of different options at the moment. As outlined in the report, what we want is to, specifically on this issue, to go away and look at all the options. But we do know that we need to expand all the different ways that we can make housing available. So we're looking at all the options basically, but we haven't settled on one particular option.
Tom, the short answer is yes. 5 years ago, we were discussing this sort of thing as a way forwards. I have no idea what happened between 2014 and 2018, but certainly it's one of the things we can look at as part of that. Whether it'll work or not, I don't know, but the short answer is yes, but a long time ago. Did you have anything else, Tom?
No, that was all.
Thank you, excellent. I'm so glad we both got our breath back. Right, my turn. Thank you very much for all your comments. I agree with Luke, which I suspect will be a hashtag that won't feature on a few Facebook pages very soon. Access to the private rented sector is very, very important. Where I disagree with the Shadow Housing Minister, very kindly came down to us, our Labour housing colleague who came down from Westminster last week, is you can't purely build your way out of the housing situation that we face. We've actually got to do something here and now, and that means making it easier and safer to rent privately. We know many people who come on our housing wait list are scared of 6-month tenancies and they're scared the rents are too high. And that will only get worse in the elephant in the room, Mark, which is universal credit, which we all know is a real issue. So what we as I forgot to do, I'm a Liberal Democrat, by the way, Liam, so you can hit me later. But one of the things we Liberal Democrats in Portsmouth are very interested in is expanding the rent deposit scheme. Because it's very difficult in a city whereby government is telling us to build more homes that we can theoretically cope with, and which has an air pollution problem, which may or may not get worse as a result of that, not to be able to deal with what we've got. And so that's why we want to expand the rent deposit scheme. We're very interested in guarantors as well, actually giving people guarantees, and that's one of the things I'm delighted that Mark and the team are interested in looking at the moment. But I do agree with Luke that actually one of the issues is around demand. We need to know who, and we need to know how many. At the moment, we've got a rough idea. All we know is that the number of people have doubled, and the government funding's being cut. This is not great. Being polite about it, but it's an issue that we have got to work with as an authority. So demand is very, very important. And so on that basis, I am delighted to be able to suggest that to accept all the recommendations and progress it from here. And hopefully come back very, very soon. Oh, so one final thing. One of the things that this is also tied into is the homelessness strategy, which is linked to the Homeless Reduction Act, which Mark mentioned earlier on. One of the issues there is the biggest single source of people coming here for temporary accommodation is leaving private rented tenancies. We want to work on why that happens, how often it's the landlord's fault, how often it's the tenant's fault, how often it's somewhere in the middle. We want to work that out. And then that way we can hopefully try and reduce homelessness partly by preventing it, as opposed to just purely dealing with the consequences. And I think those two things go together. But Mark and James, I'm very grateful to you for this report. Thank you for all the hours, and I'm happy to proceed with that. So now we move to agenda item 4, which is called the Empty Private Property Strategy. Again, this is in James's name. I don't know whether he wants to opine us, or failing that, just speak to Claire. Excellent. Hello. Thank you very much. Fire away, Claire.
Hey, thank you. So the purpose of the report is to present the updated empty private property strategy, which outlines the Council's approach to reducing the number and impact of empty homes. So the empty private residential properties in Portsmouth have a significant impact upon their local environment and the community. They're also a waste of valuable housing resource which could be used to provide a home. Therefore, it's vital that the Council works to identify empty private properties and, where possible, bring them back into full use. There is no statutory requirement for us to have a strategy, but this strategy is proposed in recognition of the need to reduce the number of empty properties in the city and as best practice to have a coordinated approach to dealing with the issue. The strategy focuses on privately owned residential premises, which is defined as having the following 3 characteristics. Firstly, that the dwelling is wholly unoccupied. Secondly, that it's been empty for more than 6 months. And the time frame that's been set by Portsmouth City Council is because it's felt that 6 months is a reasonable time frame for an owner to bring a property back into use themselves. After this amount of time has elapsed, intervention by the Council feels reasonable to encourage action to be taken by the owner. The longer that a property is left empty, the increased likelihood of a negative impact from the local community. And finally, the third characteristic is that it's privately owned dwellings within this strategy. The strategy identifies the legislation around empty properties, the reason why they become empty, which is a number of reasons, and the impact that they can have. Putting it in a local context shows that the impact in Portsmouth City Council leads to 3 strategic aims. The first strategic aim is to tackle the problems with empty properties caused by local local residents, particularly focusing upon environmental issues and antisocial behaviour. The second aim is to minimise the blight that empty properties can cause on property prices, and the third aim is to maximise the usable housing stock in the city by supporting owners of empty private properties to return them to functional homes. This will be achieved through a focus on the following areas: communication, advice and support, working with stakeholders, and enforcement. The recommendation is that the Cabinet Member for Housing approves the Council's empty private property strategy, and the reason for this is to bring up to the strategy up to date and to meet the needs of the customers and the residents of Portsmouth.
Claire, thank you very much. Any comments from our colleagues on the Residents' Consortium on the CLG? Silence. Okay, thank you very much. Luke?
Question first. So in 5.4, you've got a map which shows where the properties empty for 6 months are, and I don't know if you're looking at colour or black and white versions, but on the colour one I'm looking at on my phone, it shows a hot spot of around where we are now, where there's between 47 and 70 empty properties all in one location. As far as I can tell, it's around here. I think, well, what is that then? That's my first question.
Any answers? I've only got the black and white version, so you'll have to forgive me. So I'm assuming that on the black and white version, this is the dark bit. So it does look suspiciously like university country to me, but I don't want to cast aspersions on our university colleagues.
If I just explain that, obviously I requested these maps to be created just to give an idea of like hotspots, as we say. And they're postcode related, so that's why there's clusters. Yeah, that's, I mean, I can't make comment on any more than that, I'm afraid.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion, Lauren? Thank you very much for that, which is that, no, that's absolutely fine. It's just to clarify that, and then please email that to Luke, to Tom, and to me. Just to confirm, as I said, it looks suspiciously like university country, but I'm sure Luke would never want to cast aspersions on our lovely university.
No,
thank you very much. That's good.
But no, I just think it's an interesting thing. So it's a very large number in one place. It looks, as far as I can tell on a small map, I mean, it's roughly where we are now. I just wondered what it was.
I will also look at the empty rooms in the civic offices and see.
Well, who knows? And the other point I was going to make really is governance. This is actually quite timely because the government statistics have been released for local authority districts across England on level of homelessness, which shows 939 in this city, which makes us, in terms of the change, the worst performing in the country. I mean, it more than doubled. The second worst performance was Hartlepool, where it went up by 53%. So the question is, why has it doubled here? Now, I mean, I know that Councillor Sanders, you've been asked about this, and you've made a comment, but I want to know actually, why has it gone up by over 100%? I could come up with a couple of theories for some of it. Maybe I'll float them and see what officers say. So one of my theories would be, is Leamington and Horatio houses included in those statistics, bearing in mind these statistics are for October. And then the other one is there any impact from university accommodation coming on stream? Because I could imagine, and I don't know, that you might have situations where some landlords are unable to find student tenants and are holding properties empty, hoping that something turns up. So those would be my guesses, but I'd be interested in any officer thoughts on that.
Thank you, Luke. Sorry, I was looking. Tom gave me actually the colour map of where it is, and it really does look suspiciously like university country, or failing at the railway line. Colleagues, so Luke's points are basically how, and is the impact of the decant from the two tower blocks by October 2018 the main reason for it? And secondly, what about university accommodation, whether that's come on stream and whether that's actually been a problem? I don't know if private sector colleagues could offer some help on that one.
Yeah. So the data has come from council tax records, so we can't give you the definitive information about all of that. That's held by council tax rather than the private sector housing team. But we can confirm that they do include local authority owned housing. So the assumptions around the tower blocks, that they should be contributing to those numbers because council-owned properties are included in that, and so are the university buildings and student properties. So those two assumptions are probably correct, but we can't 100% corroborate because it's not our data.
Okay, and the same would apply with university accommodation, is that correct? Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. Any more questions, Luke?
No, but just as a comment, I did find the jump in the numbers to be quite disturbing, and I looked back, the time series goes all the way back to 2004, and in the earliest years than that, it was this sort of level it is now, sat around 700 for a long time, and then dropped right down to 400 and just over 400 in 2017, and it would be, I think it would be important to understand what has driven the uptick.
Thank you for that, Luke. Tom? Okay, that's fine. It is really good, thank you for that. Right. I have to say, I also found the increase. We've doubled the number of empty properties in our city in the period between October 2017 and October 2018. So that's nearly 1,000 properties that were empty during that period. So it's not purely the case of it was all in October 2018. I have to say I find that totally consistent with everything I've seen walking around the city. Too many empty private properties. And officer colleagues were probably bored rigid with me explaining to people when we resumed control of the council, why are all these properties empty, and that was in May, Luke. And then I discovered that some of them were council, many of them were private, and it's important to try and cut the amount of time that council properties are empty, and we're working on that. It's also important to try and make sure that any private properties that are empty, I've got some in the area I represent, there are others dotted around the city, are also brought back into use. Again, it's because we have to deal with what we've got. I also know that there were some void properties in Leamington and Horatia houses when we came in May. There were also some other properties that were void in places like Wilmcote House. Also the properties in Ivy Close, for instance, were not occupied at that stage. So that probably would contribute to the list too. But clearly there has been a bit of an impact from that, although it's probably, I think, about 100 between May and October, as opposed to an increase of nearly 500. So I think it would be unfair to say it's purely because of that. But hopefully if the trend goes down next year, then that will be helpful. But I don't think it negates the need to actually try and get empty private properties back into use, because I think that is absolutely essential. I think as far as university accommodation is concerned, that again is an interesting point, and I think that's one we're going to have to raise in future. But again, the idea is to try and not just deal with the demand about housing in this city, the supply of housing in the city, but also try and deal with the demand by utilising what we've got. I mean, I'm sure everybody's seen so many empty properties walking around the place and wondering why they're empty. Some are empty even though people are paying rent and council tax. It sounds mad, but that has existed in the past. So I think I welcome this strategy, and I hope it's another way to show that we as a council are taking action to try and reduce the housing issues we've got in this city. I have only one question, Claire. You talk about 6 months as being a sensible period, and that's great. But the legal information and the law seems to start at 2 years. Will there be a problem if we start intervening after 6 months? So the landlord's going to go to, look, don't come to me till after 2 years, or even 3 years in the case of enforcement action?
I think it's probably important to recognise that enforcement action is only one tool at our disposal, and actually we're trying to have a very proactive approach, particularly with the new strategy, that waiting until a 2-year period, it's already really too late. It's already having an impact on the local community, and so you're right that actually 2 years is the threshold for us to be able to take formal enforcement action, but there are an awful lot of things that we can do in a less formal way to try and prevent those properties even reaching that point. So
yeah, that's excellent news, and that's exactly what we're after. trying to work proactively to try and reduce the number of void properties. And my feeling is too many, even before we resumed control of the council, my feeling was there were too many empty properties in the city, and that seems to be vindicated by the figures. And so we've got to try and get action to get it down, but also try and make sure they become sustainable properties in future. So I very much welcome this report, colleagues, and would be delighted to approve it. And I look forward to updates as we go along, although probably not next week. And I will be very interested to know the two hot spots, because it's not, as Tom has pointed out to me, it's not just the really dark one on the black and white one, but there does look to be one around, I think it's the railway station, Thomas, which will be mildly interesting if we're looking at houses there. But no, thank you very much, colleagues. That's incredibly welcome. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I move to agenda item 5, which is purchasing property for homeless accommodation. So, James, again, this is in your name. Who do you wish to put that forward? Joe, fire away.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. The report seeks approval from yourself to instruct the purchase of £1 million portfolio of properties, providing a portfolio of temporary homeless accommodation. Our duty to homeless people is obviously clear, and obviously we've had the updated allocation policy in January. Key elements then, I'll attempt to be brief. Homeless Reduction Act places a duty on local authorities to intervene at the earliest stage to prevent homelessness in their area. Also requires housing authorities to provide services to all those affected, not just those who have a priority need under the primary legislation. There's an enhanced prevention duty, meaning the council is required to work with people to prevent homelessness at an earlier stage, and there is duty for those who are already homeless for the council to support those households for 56 days to relieve their homelessness by helping them to secure accommodation. If homelessness is not prevented or relieved, a main housing duty is owed to households who are eligible, have a priority need, and are not homeless intentionally. The Housing Act, as amended, provides the statutory guidelines for assessing whether a housing authority has a main homelessness duty. Where a main homelessness duty is owed, this authority will discharge its duty by either an offer of a private sector tenancy, an offer of a tenancy via the allocation scheme, an offer of temporary accommodation until a settled home is available, and there will be no choice as to the tenure which is offered. It's purely subject to availability, suitability and affordability. Preference for a specific area will be taken into consideration where possible but cannot be guaranteed. Homeless people who the Housing Authority has no statutory duty to house are provided for within the banding scheme of the allocation policy. The current demand then for accommodation, rough sleepers within the city are supported to access emergency hostel bed spaces where their needs are assessed and support is available to them. Currently we know of approximately 60 individuals sleeping rough in the city, and of those about 45 use the night bed service. Full detail is obviously available in the Street Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Partnership strategy. We have approximately 100 households per week in temporary accommodation. They can be either awaiting assessment for a duty or waiting for the right home and waiting for the suitable home. And the housing waiting list currently holds approximately 2,000 families who are waiting for a new home, 42% of whom are current tenants. 47% of all applications are due to overcrowding in their property, 32 are as a result of medical need. All applications placed in 4 bandings, low, medium, high and exceptional as per the allocation policy. Demand for temporary accommodation then currently outstrips supply, with more people coming into the service than those that leave it, and so there's therefore currently a backlog of households waiting in temporary accommodation. Working under the assumption that short-term crisis accommodation will always be needed, our aim is to make sure that that would be used only in exception, and for PCC to have access to enough medium and long-term temporary accommodation with appropriate levels of support to be able to operate within its agreed budget. To be sustainable, the rate of, it sounds really obvious, but to be sustainable, the rate of people leaving temporary accommodation and moving into permanent property needs to equate to or be greater than the rate of people coming into the temporary accommodation. The proposal is that the properties purchased for this portfolio would be allocated to the criteria that I've gone through. So people under the rough sleeper and homeless strategy, short-term crisis accommodation or medium-term temporary accommodation. Biggest challenge at the moment is undoubtedly the provision of medium-term temporary accommodation and the need to use short-term crisis accommodation for longer than we would want to. When this need changes, however, holding a portfolio of properties that can be moved flexibly within those three categories would be very helpful. The properties that we would like to buy, number of different types of properties that could be considered for purchase. They have varying risks, benefit, costs for each of the different types. So feasibility study, survey, financial appraisal will be undertaken for any property being purchased. We'd assess the condition of the property, age of the building elements, identify building defects, assess the suitability of the building layout to meet demand, establish and understand the 30-year maintenance plan, ensure that the financial appraisal that the building is affordable against the upfront costs and long-term rental yields. The recommendations then are that you approve a capital expenditure of £1 million, providing PCC to enable the delivery of a portfolio of properties to address homelessness, which would be held within the Housing Revenue Account. That the Cabinet Member for Housing delegates authority to the Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services, in consultation with Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer, to decide the composition of the portfolio, and that the Cabinet Member for Housing delegates the Housing, Neighbourhood and Buildings Director to apply for any available grant funding to support the scheme. The recommendations then obviously meet corporate priority, but they also increase the overall number of homes in the HRA and therefore improve its viability to allow for continued maintenance and tenant services to our other residents. The portfolio obviously also allows for the reduction in the cost of high-cost crisis accommodation. There's a general power of competence from legal services saying that we're able to do this. And passing over to my colleague for finance comments, should he wish to make any?
So in the capital report in February, obviously this £1 million was set aside. The finance comments quite obviously written within the report basically say that any expenditure that we have which is funded from debt finance, we need to ensure that we're able to collect the rent in order to be able to cover that cost and also the cost of maintaining the properties. Now, given the nature of some of the clients that we have, what we tend to have is a high turnover. So in order to be able to cover that cost of maintenance and borrowing, we need to be able to collect the rent. Now, it may not be in all circumstances that we're able to make it financially viable when we look at properties in isolation and on a particular client group. So Joe mentioned the word portfolio about 400 times, and the reason for that is that what we're looking at is that we will provide some property where we know we'll have regular tenancy where we're able to collect that rent, and then some others where we're able to look after clients who perhaps are more transient and are on a short term where we have longer voids, and within the £1 million it will be financially viable for the council overall.
Thank you for that. Residents Consortium and CLG colleagues, any thoughts?
Just
Maria.
happy with the report, and I think it's a long time coming, and it's good to know that it's on its way.
Luke?
Yeah, a few comments.
Yeah, feel free.
So the build-up of usage of temporary accommodation was something that we became aware of when we were running the council in about October 2017, and we had an ongoing problem with that. And it was one of the things which we ran out of time to do anything about it, but it was certainly a concern that we had. We've also been addressing some of this through the Housing Scrutiny Panel, and it's certainly been interesting to see the statistics and to see what the actual problem with this really it's about move-on accommodation. It's about getting people out of the system at the other end. That is the fundamental difficulty. I think at least a part of that is driven by the very low rate of housing completions of any kind in this city at the moment. Aside from student accommodation and older persons housing, the actual level of general needs housing completions is at a very low level, and that means that you also miss out on Section 106 housing that can go alongside that. There is noticeable, of course, that Vivid Homes are going to be doing most of the development out of the prison, and that will have an effect on supply. I think listening to what officers have said, and also in the report, I get the feeling of what you're looking at primarily is about short-term and medium-term accommodation, and that makes sense. I mean, we are, as we found in the scrutiny panel, we are now using, this council is now using hotels to place people, and that's an expensive thing to do. So having some other form of accommodation makes sense. I mean, one thing which I've said in the scrutiny panel, and I'll say it here, is which I think may be worth at least considering, is particularly small units, because the small units are going to be cheaper, and where you have permitted development rights to convert offices into housing, all space standards don't apply. And while I would not advocate for permanent residency, extremely small properties, that for an interim basis where the alternative is a hotel room or a bed and breakfast placement, I think it is justifiable and your money will go further. So I suggest that's something you might want to look into.
Thank you for that, Luke. Sorry, for the people who don't know, Luke chairs this housing scrutiny panel to which he refers. Council colleagues, the idea of moving people in temporary accommodation into either, I think it was converted office accommodation, that was one of your suggestions, yes?
Well, it's just a suggestion.
That's fine, no, I want to try and see if it flies. So thank you for that, Luke. But small, I did put the word pokey down, but I think that would be mildly pejorative. So into small accommodation, is that something that the demand is telling us would work? I mean, I've got visions of converting Arthur Commercial Road and sort of turning it into small residential accommodation. But I mean, is that something we could consider, or would that just not feel right for the sort of people who are just leaving their homes or maybe have been kicked out by their friends or family?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things that Councillor Stubbs said there as we went through in the housing scrutiny panel. We've got a mixture. We've got a lot of single people that come through, and therefore we need to find the right sort of properties for them, but equally for families. And what's important is that we're putting people into the right sort of temporary accommodation, and then we put them into the right sort of move-on accommodation, because otherwise we could just be exacerbating a problem if we put people into the wrong properties. Also, it's making sure it's in the right location. So we want to make sure that it's right, if it's people with children, that it's near to where their schools are and things like that. So it's every individual case needs to be looked at to see what the right thing is. We are looking at increase the use of private sector, as well as trying to have more property. So it's looking at a suite of options. The particular option that you laid out isn't necessarily off the table, but we want to make sure it's the right thing for the people that are on the list.
Okay.
I think my point in it is we are putting lots of people into bed and breakfast and hotels. We are currently in a very far from ideal situation, and that there are a whole range of things which would be an improvement from where we are now, and you've got to make the money go as far as possible and have increased capacity by as much as possible with the funds that you've got.
Thank you for that, Luke. Tom?
Once again, Luke's covered what I was going to say.
Blimey, as if there's rehearsals here. This is excellent. Right, Maria, thank you very much for your comments. It's been a while since what was an idea and basically a line on a piece of paper has become council policy. We have many issues, and Luke has rightly outlined several of them, facing people who either sleep rough or who are forced into homelessness for a whole raft of reasons. And we think it's important as an administration to invest in our city. And that actually means buying homes to house our homeless people, because that is incredibly important to us. Luke is right in that a lot of it is related to what's called moving on accommodation. So we know that when I took on this job, I was told that there are many people who currently sleep rough who don't want to be there, but they actually want a half-decent property that they could go to so they could get back into, I'm going to say normal life, but there is no such thing as normal, it's only conventional. So a more stable existence so they can then move on in jobs, so not go back into the gig economy, which was a major issue, but in the jargon, these are people, as Lucas said, are moving on. And that's always been one of the categories I've been particularly interested in. The second bit is around people who are in temporary accommodation for a whole raft of reasons. And it is one of the long-term issues facing our city. In fact, all of the things around bringing back private properties into use, renting privately, doing this is about utilising the existing buildings so we can tackle some of the long-term housing issues that exist now. It's not the only thing we're going to do. For instance, at this last meeting agreed to provide 23 flats at the long vacant Southsea Community Centre for ideally temporary accommodation, but that may change by the time it's built. And note that phrase, by the time it's built, because we have an issue now, and we would quite like to deal with the issue now rather than wait years, because that's simply not on. But we believe it is part of the package. Now, Luke has mentioned quite a lot about making your money go further, and that's perfectly understandable. However, what Joe and Wayne have outlined is that once we have a financial model, which basically means that this can wash its face, and that's what I've sort of got in the very long finance comments at the end, Wayne. But once we have that, then what we actually do is that the money actually becomes the least important part of everything. It sounds actually shocking. I know, because everybody in the press have rightly focused on the £1 million, which is lovely. But this is the down payment. Because we've got a model that works, and because we've got properties that are empty, as you might have noticed from the last item, by doing it in a coherent and an integrated way, this is just the start. Because we've got the model that is right, we can then invest, provided it stacks up, provided it washes its face, we can invest in a portfolio that can give people who either are forced into temporary accommodation or who are sleeping rough a better start in life and the sort of start in life they need. It's a really, really simple idea. Many people have thought we were completely mad to pursue this. But I don't think we are. I'm delighted we've got to this stage. I would like to thank everyone for the help in this. And hopefully this is just the start. I'm pretty sure it will be. So thank you very much, colleagues, for that. And thank you to Luke and Tom for your comments as well. I would only say that although I understand Luke's point of view, I think one of the issues is accommodation's got to be livable. I'm nervous I understand where Luke is coming from, and I'm grateful to him for that, but I'm always concerned about people living in pokey holes, essentially. But I'm interested in some good ideas there for Commercial Road, and I'll pass them over to Delancey when we get to the Northern Quarter. But thank you very much, colleagues. That was excellent. So now we move to you'll be delighted to know that we move to the final item on this agenda, which is, I have to get this right here, the Council Housing Maintenance and Improvements and Housing IT Business Software. James, again you are in there, but I suspect it will be young Meredith who will be offering up how we're going to spend the money.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. The purpose of the report is to inform members of the spending proposals for 2019-20 for the Council House Repairs and Maintenance Plan, and to seek approval to incur expenditure. By way of background, the City Council approved the Housing Investment Programme on the 12th of February of this year, and the Council Housing Repairs and Maintenance Budget for 2018-19 and 19-20 was approved at the Housing Cabinet Decision Meeting on the 29th of January 2019. The following report and appendices gives the detail behind those high-level numbers. If we go through the report, Appendix A covers our housing revenue expenditure for 2019-20. It's £24.5 million, includes items such as general day-to-day repairs, void works, gas safety servicing, external decks and repairs. Appendix B is our capital expenditure works, just under £22 million, and these works will include our new kitchens, new bathroom installation, works on disabled facilities grants, new heating installations, and a number of specifically named projects within that list as well. I draw your attention to line 10 of that appendix, Councillor Sanders, line of sprinklers. There's £1 million in for next year for installing sprinklers at 2 of our high-rise blocks, and it's part of a programme of work that we're looking to continue over the forthcoming years. In terms of the other appendices to the report, we have what we call our budget plan. It's a large document. There's probably in excess of 26 pages, which is added to the back of the report. That gives the geographical detail behind where we'll be spending our money next year. Based around our 7 area offices, it gives detail about the projects and the type of work and the addresses and roads where we'll be carrying out that work in 1920. The final appendix within the report refers to our spending on IT, and Graham, our business partner, will be giving the update on that area for me.
Okay, so the IT budget here is split into 2 areas. The hardware specifically is around how we manage to keep, on an ongoing basis, the systems that we use within the Directorate safe and secure and efficient as well. So the funds for this is generally to replace the exciting stuff like hardware, server computers, infrastructure that's used to protect us from the outside threats that unfortunately we have to protect ourselves from every year. The software side of it is more about how we develop the systems we use to deliver the services to our staff, to enable them to deliver services to tenants in the fastest, most efficient possible way. So over the following year, we're going to be doing some work on our in-house built systems, for example, the housing options system, to ensure that we comply with all the recent legislation, for example, H-Click, making sure we can get all the homelessness data out into the central government systems in a quick, efficient manner, which we've started already. We're looking at improving our year-end system, which we use to manage the uprating of rents, make sure we get things done again quickly and accurately. We're also looking to make changes to some of the other systems we use, like the Reserve Fund database, to make sure that we can actually secure it a little better, but more importantly, provide a better link into our live Northgate system. On top of that, we're also looking at the potential to extend our document management system to remove some of the more old-fashioned ways of working that we're stuck with in terms of paper. And on top of that, we'll be looking at whether we need to buy any additional software to run on the Windows 10 platform, which we'll be moving to this year.
Okay, Graham, thank you. Joe, I have an interest to declare, which is not just pecuniary or whatever. My mum is a council tenant, so she may or may not be affected by this. She lives in a high-rise block, Meredith. She lives in Ladywood House, so I'm not sure which ones you're going to. I know you've done the assessment already. Okay. Along with what?
Ladywood
and Handsworth houses. Okay. So there is a list, I understand, of blocks that will be done. How many blocks are on that list?
2. And Handsworth and Ladywood for 2021.
Okay. But would it just be those 2 blocks, or would it be a rolling programme?
They're our first 2 blocks as part of our rolling programme over the next years.
Okay. And that's come from an because if the fact I've mentioned where my mum lives may mean that people think it's all sort of, all done because of me, which I don't think is true. So I just want to check. This has been done as part of an objective assessment, hasn't it?
Yeah, Councillor Saunders, just to clarify, on the programme that we're looking at for sprinklers, we've looked at a priority basis based on a number of factors, really looking at the blocks. So we're looking at the highest blocks that we've got, blocks of flats that have got only a single staircase, which we've got half a dozen blocks that have only got a single staircase as a means of escape. And then we also look at factors such as the occupants. So if we've got like sheltered accommodation in those blocks, again, they would be an increased priority. So there is a very definitive criteria for us choosing which order we do the blocks in, and out of that criteria, Handsworth House and Ladywood House are both single staircases. They're the 2 tallest blocks that we got, and Ladywood House, for instance, has got showered accommodation in it.
Now, I'm happy with the objectivity, but you never know what people may say, especially in the current climate. So thank you for that, Meredith and Steve. CLG and resident consortium colleagues, any comments at all? Maria?
I've only got a couple of questions. Page 73, it mentions asbestos. I found the answer to my question about did it include removal, the costings that you've got, but that's on the other page. But down near the bottom, you've got Legionella testing. Does that cost include any remedy that needed to be taken if there was any Legionella?
Thank you, Maria. No, the cost is purely for the testing for Legionella. Any resulting works as a result of live risk assessments would be taken care of via other budgets within our capital programme.
Sorry, there is one more. On page 99, I'm at a loss to understand why you need to do some more work on Wilmcote Housing as it's just been completely refurbished. You've got external decoration, repair or improvement, internal stairwells. Why does all that need doing so soon after it's had all that work done?
There were some areas of Wilmcote House that were not included in the original scheme, so that work is to do with the escape staircases, where the flooring and the decorations need to be done, and they weren't part of the original contract. So we're just really completing the areas that weren't completed as part of the original contract. So it's not redoing any work, it's doing some areas that were deliberately taken out of that contract.
Is that all right, Maria? Okay, Luke? No. Is it going to be an I agree with Luke session again, Tom, or do you have questions? Oh, good, excellent. Fire away, Tom.
On Appendix B on page 72, you've got environmental improvements. What kind of things does that include?
That's environmental improvements will include hard and soft landscaping, improvements to the environment around our blocks of flats and our houses.
With the IT software upgrades, will that involve any migration of personal data? And will there be any level of user acceptance testing to make sure there's no loss or corruption of data?
Well, we've not planned it, but if we do need to do any data migrations, as we would in any instance, of course, we take those things very seriously and we make sure we validate them.
Is that it, Tom? Okay. I've got an IT-related question, which is we get some pressure as elected members about trying to migrate to the cloud, because that's seen as an important way of working. I'm always concerned about anything getting hacked, particularly if it's sensitive data, such as the stuff we have here. Is there a sense of moving towards cloud migration, or is that actually just going to be part of a wider discussion across the authority?
So that will be, it's actually part of the IT strategy across the authority, so it's not necessarily particularly a housing thing. But yeah, absolutely, going forward, I mean, industry is moving in that direction. We'll hear more about it. But we need to know at the moment, it's from an IT perspective, our strategy is to move to Microsoft services in the cloud, which are extremely secure and are used in many organisations across the UK for that very reason.
Okay, I think that may be one to keep an eye on, not just here, but I think at our Governance and Audit Committee, where I suspect it comes up on every meeting. Meredith, I see in the major works programme that you have that one housing office escapes improvements, which is Portsea. Now, Portsea being lovely, obviously needs nothing, which is good news. Am I correct in this? No. Aside from the more minor works at the back.
The list of works that are included within the document are identified on a demand basis, Councillor Sanders, and so the works within the report are for the main priority areas. At the moment, Portsea doesn't have priorities which are higher than other areas in the city.
Okay, that's fine. I just don't want people in Portsea to come and complain, which may happen. I think, Steve, with Wilmcote House, again, I just want to come back to Maria's point about Wilmcote House. Would a lesson in future be to try and make sure that every bit is involved in the same contract?
Yeah, we do try to make sure that all the works are included, but there were just some particular elements that were taken out of that contract.
Okay. I would respectfully suggest that is a potential learning point going forwards for large contracts, because that just went on for reasons that we're all aware about. I'm happy to go with the recommendations. I have one comment to make, which again is around the money for sprinklers. We are very keen as a council to make sure we maximise safety in our blocks as much as possible. Sprinklers has been a regular demand of our colleagues in the Fire Brigades Union. and is something I am particularly delighted that we are including in here. We want to try and make sure there's a rolling programme for people living in our high-rise blocks to make sure they're as safe as possible, and I'm particularly pleased that money has been found for sprinklers. I know that it's been a demand of mine frequently, and I'm delighted that people have been listening, but we need to make sure our tenants and leaseholders are as safe as possible, and I'm delighted that work is starting in the two biggest blocks. So on that basis, I'm happy to agree the recommendations as outlined in the proposal. I believe that that closes the meeting, which is as I said at the start, the final meeting of the municipal year. As it is this way, I'd just like to thank Tom and Luke for putting up with me over the past year or so, as well as to everybody involved. We may or may not see each other back again from May onwards. Who knows? But thank you very much for the past 12 months. Thank you. Bye.